स्टार्ट करो।
रुक जाओ, सबको थोड़ा आ जाने दो अंदर।
अर्पित सर, आपके आजू बाजू में सर आवाज आ रहा है, देखिए ना सर।
अच्छा, 1 सेकेंड। वो चल रहा है, मेरे कंट्रोल में नहीं है वो चीज। Anyways, let's begin 11 o'clock. With the permission of the chair, let's begin the session today. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this yet another exciting session of WIRC. Something that we always want to address. Virtual mode is the best way to address something which is like the heat of the moment. And before we could begin, may I request everyone to please put your hands on your heart for the ICI motto song.
येष सुप्तेषु जागृति, येष सुप्तेषु जागृति, कामं 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 कामपुरुषो पुरुषो निर्मिमाणः निर्मिमाणः, तदेव शुक्रं तद्ब्रह्मा तद्ब्रह्मा, तदेवामृतमुच्यते, तस्मिन् लोकः शतः सर्वे तदूनात्यति कश्चन एतद्द्वैत 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 एतद्द्वैत।
Thank you, and good morning once again. Welcome to this session of WIRC on a very, very burning topic right now. We all have been us, I think this entire start of a financial year has been a very, exciting year in terms of a lot of actions, a lot of adventures, and a lot of, actions in terms of legal and compliances are happening. I'm sure all of you must be, some of you must be in the middle of bank audit, some of you must be in the middle of some other compliances, some other filings and all that. But one thing that has just struck all of our attention, and we are all being harassed in a way, is by these 148 notices. And therefore we thought at WIRC, let us quickly invite someone to talk about these notices. What should be done? What are the course of action that we could take? Of course, on merit, so we'll keep on drafting and we'll keep on submitting, but what are really some of the good precedents that we could always use in these case laws? At the outset, again, greetings of Ashtami today. I'm sure all of you must be celebrating this Navratra. So I have a great start of the year. And before I could invite Piyush to introduce our faculty, I would request the chairman, C.M. Murtuza Kachwala, to please address the gathering. Over to you, Chairman.
Thank you, Arpit. A very warm good morning to all the participants. Really encouraging to see almost 430 registrations. So great, guys. Thank you very much. And it really shows that the topic is of interest to so many people on a Saturday morning. Let me first thank Regional Council member Sri Arpit Kabra for organizing such a nice topic today, and Advocate Neelkanth for joining us and agreeing to spare his valuable time to share his knowledge with all of us. Let me also recognize presence of Treasurer WIRC CA Shandak and today's coordinator CA Praveen Bangad. I will quickly take a couple of minutes. So now notices for income escaped assessment. How do they get to know this? So I think we all know now a lot of data is getting captured and a lot of analytics is happening at the back end. And so I think the government or the department also started using so much of data analytics. And here is a case where we also need to start using the technology, the analytics, and learn a lot of those. And at WIRC, as part of our theme this year, which is leap towards excellence, achievement, and development. One of our goals that we kept is how can we equip our members in terms of technology, and that is where we are trying to create some tools and utilities which will be made free of cost available to members at large for utilization in their offices. We are also trying to identify software which can be used by practitioners, and we are trying to tie up with the software vendors at a much discounted rate. And the important thing is we are also conducting various courses on technology, and we did one 4-day program on fusion of Tableau and Excel. Last week we again did a 4-day program, 8 hours on Excel, where various lookups, analytics, etc. were taught. But along with the shorter, and we are also doing next week something on CAT, the audit tools and technology, which is like the idea, data analytics, and this thing. But other than that, we are also doing a larger duration program as well. And we launched 4 batches in the last 6 months. And part 1, we are teaching Python and SQL, 30 hours, 60 hours, 9,000 rupees on Friday evening, 6 to 8, Saturday evening, 6 to 8, Sunday morning, 10 to 1, where we get the data and we can do the coding ourselves. Okay, like if purchases happen, how much purchase from which vendor, if there are multiple rate, then the rate comparison. There is so many things which you can do in a procure to pay, order to cash, bank reconciliation, and live data hands-on, what you can use in a CA office. We teach that. Part 2, we've done 2 successful batches of 25 people each, and there we are teaching like the Power BI and Tableau. How do you present by way of graphs, charts, diagrams, etc. So we'll keep on doing the traditional areas like direct tax, indirect tax, international tax, the burning issues, the changes which happen in schedule change, the CARO, etc. We are also trying to equip the members by doing various refresher courses on valuation, internet, etc. And of course, we'll also do a lot of things on the technology. And I would request all the members that any input that you have, please write to us at wrc@ici.in, or any one of us, you can WhatsApp message, and we'll try to implement that. With that, thank you very much. Happy learning, and over to Arpit again. Arpit, over to you.
Thank you, Murtuza bhai. Thank you for sharing those updates. And believe me, we've got a wonderful feedback on our technology courses. As said by the great Darwin, survival of the fittest. And I think, in this race, we need to really adapt technology. And I think one of the best ways to do it is through WIRC at a very subsidized cost of just 9,000. So I think please look up to that, and let's understand data analytics as well. Because that is what has led to inviting Neelkanth sir here using data analytics by Income Tax Department. So, more on that by the faculty, learned faculty himself. May I now invite the Treasurer Piyush Chandak to please introduce our faculty briefly, and so that we can start off with the session. Over to you, Piyush bhai.
Thank you, Arpit bhai and Murtuza bhai. As rightly said by Arpit bhai and Murtuza bhai, we are definitely most of our clients would be getting the notices under 148. And as rightly said by Murtuza bhai, the reason behind those notices would be data analytical tools and the additional information gathered by the government machineries. So as a member of our institute, the forum to fight against these notices is, in my opinion, is the right forum is the office of the government and not the social media. So a small appeal not to go on social media against all those notices and anything which is not liked by us. And all our grievances should be addressed to the right forum only. And coming to the introduction part, I am very fortunate to introduce before you a learned faculty advocate Neelkanth Khandelwal, who is qualified as a CA as well in 2013 and law in 2014 from the Government Law College, Mumbai. He appears before various income tax authorities in assessment proceedings and appeals before CIT and tribunal. He also appears before High Court and has some notable decisions in his credit. He has also appeared before various forums under the Prohibition of Benami Property Transactions Act as well. And with this small and sweet introduction, I hand over the mic to Arpit Bhai and the speaker. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Piyush Bhai. And without wasting any further time on this, let me invite Neelkanth sir to please address the gathering. Friends, you can all put your questions right in the chat. Piyush Bhai, all of us are there in the background. This is a webinar mode, so probably you'll not be able to speak. This is not a meeting; it's a webinar mode. So only the host and panelists would be able to speak. But you can always interact with us through chat function. May I request everyone to please only use this function for questions so that we don't miss a relevant question. The more the questions, the better is the learning. So please do not post any other things other than your relevant questions on the topic. Neelkanth sir, over to you.
Good morning all. I hope I'm audible. Good morning all. Firstly, special thanks to CA Murtuza Kachwala, Chairman WRC, CA Arpit Kabra, CA Piyush Chandak, CA Praveen Bangad, for giving me this opportunity to address this gathering on Section 148 reopening of assessment. Friends, there has been lot of litigation in the past as regards reopening of assessments which have happened on the technicals, on the merits. The courts have been burdened with so many decisions on various aspects. You name the point and you would see the issue before the various appellate forums and the High Court. As we are there in the virtual mode today, we are getting into the normalcy where the court proceedings are also coming back to normal, where there is physical also happening. We have been on virtual. We are today also there on virtual. See whether this is one can say an endless debate as to whether virtual, whether physical, whether hybrid. Now we are also in the hybrid where there is physical mode as well as the virtual mode. So in fact the tribunals are functioning in the hybrid mode where there are virtual login ID passwords which are given, and also physical courts going on. So one can say this is the hybrid, probably would be the new normal, would be the new trend which would be going on. And as far as the topic, as I was just saying, that there has been so many. Let me start with that. These provisions of Section 148, reopening of assessment, what used to happen earlier, I'll not take much time as to what was there in the past. We would straight away go into the topics, but see, there was the decision of GK and Driveshaft Supreme Court, which laid the procedure as to what has to happen in the reopening proceedings, the income escaping proceedings. Sorry. That once a notice has been received by us for reopening of assessment, we had to file our return of income. After having filed the return of income, it is again after having filed the return of income, we should have asked the assessing officer to give what were the reasons which have been recorded for reopening the assessment. The assessing officer would then have to supply us the reasons which were there, which has been recorded by him. Now, again, as I said, for each and everything, you would have found a case law. The reasons which had been recorded by the assessing officer could not be altered, could not be substituted, had to be read as it is. The reasons once has been given to us, we object to if we are not satisfied with whatever the reasons have been. Sorry, I'm receiving message that audio is not receiving. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
It's going
I
fine.
think that Priya Patil is having some problem with.
Okay. I'm sorry. So, sorry, coming back, the reasons which were supplied to us for reopening of assessment, we used to object to the reasons which were there. The assessing officer had to dispose of those objections, and if suppose we were not satisfied with the disposal, there was no appellate forum. That is, you could not have filed an appeal to the CIT appeal or to the tribunal, because the provisions of the Act do not give you the right to file an appeal against the order disposing of the objection. So the only remedy which was available was to file a writ petition to the High Court against the order disposing of. Then the High Court would decide whether, yes, whatever the writ petition, whether it would prevail or whether it would fail. And the assessing officer would then accordingly go on to do the assessment. So as I said at the beginning, this is because of the decision of GK and Driveshaft, and mind well, this procedure had to be followed. It was not that any of this process which I just mentioned could have been dispensed with. The assessing officer was duty bound to have followed this. If he was not following, supposing, let's take an example, he used to not give the reasons which had been asked for after the assessee had filed the return of income. If he was not supplying the reasons, the reopening, we would say, that would fail. The appellate forum or the High Court would quash the reopening on that ground. Then suppose I have objected to the reopening of assessment, and the assessing officer, without disposing of the objection, goes on to do the assessment, even in that cases, as I said, the procedure had to be followed. It was not that any of these steps mentioned in the procedure could have been altered. So this is, again, at the cost of repetition, the decision of GK and Driveshaft which laid this. It was not mentioned anywhere in the Income Tax Act. Mind well, this was not. When we see 147, 148 or ahead, this was nowhere mentioned in the Act. But as I said, this was on the basis of the decision, and which had to be strictly construed. So these were the old provisions of 148. And now when we will see the procedure, we will run through the procedure. We will see that these things which have been mentioned, that the assessing officer has to give the reason and all this, it has come in the Act in a one can say in a polished manner, in a very one can say it has come in a procedural manner. So this has to be now looked into as regards the reopening notices which we are receiving. The old, as I said, the old things were happening as per the decision of GK and Driveshaft. Now we will see as to what the new procedure says for reopening of assessment. I'll just like to do a screen share for the presentation which I've just prepared. Yeah, I hope the screen share is visible. Yeah, so
Yes, it's visible.
Slideshow पे करिए sir.
Sorry, I'm not able to. Sorry.
Slideshow.
Yeah, slideshow. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So income escaping assessment, section 147. Sorry. If any, so I'll just quickly read this. If any income chargeable to tax in the case of an assessee has escaped assessment for any assessment year, the assessing officer may, subject to the provisions of section 148 to 153, assess or reassess such income or recompute the loss or the depreciation allowance or any other allowance or deduction for such assessment year hereafter in this section and in section 148 to 153 referred to as the relevant assessment year. Now there is an explanation which is there below section 147. It says that for the purpose of assessment or reassessment or recomputation, under this section, the assessing officer may assess or reassess the income in respect of any issue which has escaped assessment, and such issue comes to the notice subsequently. So there is something which is there before the assessing officer, for which he is reopened, and then there is subsequently during the course of doing the assessment, that is what it says, that comes to the notice subsequently in the course of the proceedings under this section, irrespective of the fact that the provisions of section 148A have not been complied with. So those will also be covered. That is those which come to the notice of the assessing officer during the course of the assessment, that is for which have not been the case for the reopening but would be included over here. That is what the explanation makes it clear. Now, issue of notice where income has escaped assessment. What does it say? It says that before making the assessment, reassessment or recomputation under section 147 and subject to the provisions of section 148A. Now, this is what we are going to deal with, the provisions of section 148A in detail. Now, so that if it says before making the assessment, reassessment or recomputation under section 148 and subject to the provisions of section 148A. I would like to pause over here to first see as to what is 148A and the relevant sections and the relevant clauses, subclauses over there, and then come over here. Yes. So what is 148A about? Let's first see here, because this would, as I said, this would form the basis, this would form the base, this would form the roots, one can say. Now, what does it say? The assessing officer shall, before issuing any notice under section 148, conduct any inquiry if required with the prior approval of the specified authority with respect to the information which suggests that the income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment. Now, bear in mind my emphasis here would be that it says the assessing officer shall. It is not that the word used is may. So he will have to follow these procedures which are mentioned here in below before issuing any notice under section 148. It says conduct any inquiry if required. Now, here it is on the discretion, where because it says if required, it is not that he is duty bound to do inquiry in each and every case. It says that it is if required. Now, one can say that how do you distinguish where the assessing? So this is basically left on the wisdom of the assessing officer to decide whether the inquiry is required or not required, because here it says if required. The above which was said, the assessing officer shall. So as I said, when it says shall, so he is duty bound to follow this procedure. But where it comes to doing the inquiry, it is on the discretion of the assessing officer, with the prior approval of the specified authority with respect to the information which suggests that income has escaped assessment or not. Now, friends, before again going ahead, I'm digressing a bit, because it is very important for us to understand as to, I have compartmentalized our discussion into three parts. One is that the old provisions, that is 31st March 2021, prior to 31st March 2021, on 1st April 21, we had the Finance Act, which the new Finance Act. So this is one compartmentalization, that is issues prior to 31st March 21. Then we had, as I said, from 1st April 2021 to 31st March 22, and that is the second part. And the third compartmentalization is what is going to be from 1st April 22. The act is already there before us. So these are the three compartmentalization which I would wanted to just address before we also go ahead, because I would be then addressing into, as I said, it would be difficult for me to link. So I would be, again, at the cost of repetition, this is very important. Please bear in mind, first compartmentalization is till 31st March 2021, what was happening till 31st March 2021. Second compartmentalization is from 1st April 21 to 31st March 22. And third compartmentalization is from 1st April 22, which is going to be effective, which has, as I said, the act is already there before us. So this is the third compartment. So this is what one needs to be having in mind when we are discussing it ahead. Now, as I said, the first compartmentalization, because of the COVID pandemic, and we were hit with, and the notices for reopening, there were the notices, the dates for issuing 148 were getting extended time and again, and all those things. So we have seen there are various decisions of High Court. Even Bombay High Court is now there. So again, I'm digressing a bit so that it is there in everyone's knowledge. So what happened on 31st March 21 was that you could have issued. So again, compartmentalization number 1, where assessment notices could have been issued for 14, 15 and onwards, that is 6 years provisions which were there. On 1st April 21, we had the new Finance Act which had come in. But as I was saying, that because of COVID, the compartmentalization 1 notice, the cases, the notices were getting, the time limit for issuing 148 notices was getting extended. So on 1st April 21, we had the new Finance Act 21 and also the compartmentalization 1 notices which were there, the time limit. So what happened really was that there was overlapping. So on 1/4/21, the assessing officer was to be issuing 148 notices as per the Finance Act 21. The Finance Act, there was no power to the assessing officer that he could have still continued with the category 1 notices which I was just mentioning, and therefore there were a lot of writ petitions. As I said, Bombay is now there. There is Delhi High Court which is there, which says that the reopening notices which have been issued on 1st April 21, covering on the basis of the category 1, if Finance Act 21 has not been followed, that is the new provisions of 148A have not been followed, the reopening notices have all been caused that they are bad in law. And there is there is huge revenue loss on that account, which we have seen, which has happened. So be it that as it may. So this is what I wanted to bring to your notice. As I said, I'm digressing a bit, but it is important because we need to have this in our mind when we are reading the new provisions. Now going ahead, as I said, conduct any inquiry if required with the prior approval and so on. Point number 2 says, provide an opportunity of being heard to the assessee. Now, I have struck down this with the approval of the specific authority because in the Finance Act 22, that is category 3, compartmentalization 3, which is as I said, with effect from Finance Act 22, the Finance Act 22 with effect from 1st April 22, this has been struck off. So compartmentalization 2, that is from 1st April 21 to 31st March 22, which was there, it had with the approval of the specific authority. So notices which have been issued from 1st April 21 to 31st March 22 has to follow this with the approval of the specific authority. The notices which are being issued from 1st April 22, that is category 3, with the approval of specific authority has been struck off. So provide an opportunity of being heard to the assessee by serving upon him a notice to show cause within such time as may be specified in the notice, being not less than 7 days, but not exceeding 30 days from the date on which such notice is issued, or such time as may be extended by him on the basis of an application in this behalf as to why a notice under 148 should not be issued on the basis of information which suggests that income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment in the case for the relevant assessment year, and results of such inquiry, if any. So there was an inquiry which is there in 148A, if any, as per clause A. Now, what does this mean? This means that the assessing officer, as I said, before issuing a notice under section 148, he can do an inquiry. That is, as I said, in his discretion, if he wishes to. If he does not wishes to, does not do it. He will then provide an opportunity to me. He will have to give an opportunity to me by serving a notice upon me that, and what would this say? This would say that, okay, this is what I have in my possession, on the basis of which I think that I believe that there is income which has escaped assessment. What do you have to say to this? I will respond to this again, I'm going back to and fro, because that is what GK and Driveshaft had said. If you remember that after I have filed my return of income, the assessing officer will give me the reasons and I will object to the reasons, and then the assessment goes on. So one can say that this is as I said, it has come in the act now, in the polished form, one can say, where the assessing officer, before issuing a notice under 148, he does the inquiry, he gives it to me that this is what is there with me, this is what is the inquiry which has been conducted, if any. Also, I have to reply to this, and there's a time limit which has also been given, that it is not that the assessing officer gives it to me today and tells me that you come tomorrow, whatever your explanation is. So it says, as the case may be, the time limit which is specified is not less than 7 days, but not exceeding 30 days from the date on which such notice is issued at such time as may be. Now the minimum is 7, the maximum is 30. Suppose the assessing officer gives you, say for example, 10 days, and you approach the assessing officer and tells him that, okay, I'm in the process, I'm not been able to complete it. He gives you more time, because the provision over here says that extended time on the basis of an application in this behalf. So the extended time may also be given to you as to why a notice under 148 should not be issued on the basis of the information which suggests that income. So he gives it to you. You have the time to give your replies to, and after you have given your reply, then we jump to clause C. Consider the reply of the assessee furnished, if any, in response to, consider the reply of the assessee furnished, if any, in response to the show cause notice referred to in clause B. So obviously you will have to consider your reply. Then it says, the next, decide on the basis of the material available on record, including the reply of the assessee, whether or not it is a fit case to issue a notice under section 148 by passing an order with the prior approval of the specified authority within 1 month from the end of the month in which the reply referred to in clause C is received by him, or where no such reply is received within 1 month from the end of the month, in which time or extended time shall be allowed to furnish a reply as per clause B expires. So this is what I have shown the section, how it is, how the section reads as. So again, I'll repeat it. It says that before the assessing officer issues a 148, he has to follow the provisions of section 148A. What does 148A say? That the assessing officer shall have, that is, he'll have to follow the 148A procedure. Clause A says he make that, it says the conduct any inquiry if required, which we have seen. After, if suppose he has conducted any inquiry, this inquiry which he's conducted together with the information which he's having, he has to give it to me, provide an opportunity of being heard. He gives it to me. In C is mentioned that I file my reply. If suppose I do not wish to, I do not wish to. If I have filed my reply, what does clause D say? Decide on the basis. Now, when the assessing officer is with everything, that is his information, his inquiry, if any, if he's conducted, he giving it to me as to me to file my reply. I filing my reply in clause C, which is mentioned. In D, he sits with everything and decides whether it is a fit case for having to issue a notice for reopening of assessment or not. He has to pass an order. It says by passing an order with the prior approval of the specific authority. See, there are various time limits which are there. As I said, 7 days, not exceeding 30 days. Now, within 1 month from the end of the month in which the reply is furnished, which is there over here. So these time periods has to be all adhered to. We had seen in the old provisions, that is category 1, where the reopening notices were issued. There had to be various time limits which were mentioned, that before, when I objected to the reopening, the assessing officer had to pass the disposal and after 30 days only he could have begun. so there was not mentioned in the act, but that was by virtue of various decisions. Then we saw over here with the approval of the specific authority, which was there for category 2, that is 1/4/21 to 31st March 22, with the approval of the specific authority. Specific authority has been defined with. Now, again, I'm getting into the technicals, but these technicals were also seen. Time limits, if suppose they were not adhered to, if suppose the approval was in a mechanical manner, the courts have come harsh on the department, says that you cannot do it. It is a case of reopening. There has to be proper application of mind. So in my presentation, I'm not getting into the technicals aspect, but yes, one has to keep the technicals aspect also in mind when we are dealing with the assessment, when we are dealing with the reassessment, because they have also been beneficial to the assessee in so much as that the reassessments have got cost. So again, at the cost of repetition, the time limits have to be adhered to. The technicals as regards application of mind by the concerned authority when it is mentioned has also to be adhered to. And one cannot say that the assessing officer or the specific authority can just do it in a mechanical manner. So coming back, 148A has to be followed. There is a change, there is an amendment which I have said that provide an opportunity of being heard to the assessee. Now this was something which is there, which is principle of natural justice, which demands, but category 2 cases with the approval of the specific authority was mentioned, that is 1st April 21 notices to 31st March 22. That has gone away with. Now approval is not required. In any ways, it was there in the earlier thing, so I've just mentioned it because, as I said, our flow would be as per the category. Now, because the questions which suppose if you would ask, we would have to see where the 148A notices which are there are prior to 31st March. That is on or before 31st March 22 or 1st April 22. So depending on that, the things have changed. So this is what 148A talks about. Consider the reply of the assessee, if any, furnished in response to the show cause notice referred to in clause B. Decide on the basis of the material available on record, including the reply, and then so on, and pass the order. Now, suppose if you are not if the assessing officer passes an order that it is a fit case for having to issue a notice under section 148, as I said, this is an order under 148A clause D. If you are not satisfied with this, again, you have to file a writ petition to the High Court. Because against the 148A-D order, there is no appeal to the CIT appeal or to the tribunal. So this is what 148A-D is about. Again, going back over there also, when you are not satisfied with the disposal of the objections which you had raised, if you had over there, the assessing officer was also to pass an order. If you were not satisfied, you had the only remedy was to approach the High Court and writ petition. And therefore, we are seeing so many writ petitions which are being filed on the technicals also, that they are not satisfied, or for the other technical aspects. So this is what 148A-D is about. Then it says, provided that the provisions of this section shall not apply. Bear in mind, it says they shall not apply in a case where a search is initiated under section 132, or books of accounts or other documents or any assets are requisitioned under section 132A in the case of an assessee on or after 1st day of April 2021. So in the cases, now I will again come. Now in the search assessments from 1st April 2021 would also be covered by the provisions of section 148, 148A, and so on and so forth. Prior to 1st April 21, that is 31st March 21, and before that, we had 153A, which was a self-contained code where the provision, where the time limit for the notice, the returns which were filed in response to the 153A, and so on and so forth was given. But now, as I said, 148A coming from 1421, the search assessments, the reopening assessments, everything are getting covered over here. So what it says is 148A is not required to be followed. The 148A is not required to be followed, because the proviso says, provided that the provisions of this section shall not apply in a case. So 148A is not required to be followed in a case where a search is initiated under section 132 or books of accounts or other documents or any assets or acquisition under section 132A in the case of an assessee on or after 1st April 21. B says the assessing officer is satisfied with the prior approval of the principal commissioner or commissioner that any money, bullion, jewelry, or other valuable article or thing seized in a search under section 132 or requisition under 132A in the case of any other person on or after 1st April 21 belongs to the assessee. So this is again, so by this, what they are trying to cover out is that 148A will not apply to these cases also, where the assessing officer is satisfied with the prior approval of so and so. In the case of, and this is in the case of any money, bullion, jewelry, or any valuable article or thing seized in a search under 132 in the case of any other person belongs to the assessee. Or then there is C, again 148A will not apply to these cases where the assessing officer is satisfied with the prior approval of the principal commissioner or commissioner that any books of account or documents seized in the search under section 132 or requisition under 132A in the case of any other person on or after 1st April 21 pertains or pertain to or any information contained therein relate to the assessee. Now, this is what is there, relate to the assessee. I would like to pause over here. Now, this is, as I said, as per the second compartment, second category. Now, over here, there is a change that is from 1st April 22, Finance Act 22, there is a change which has been brought about. There is clause D also, which is there. Sorry. The assessing officer has received any information under the scheme notified under section 135A pertaining to income chargeable to tax, such as escaped assessment for any assessment year in the case of the assessee. Now, what is 135A, the scheme which has come in? I will just come to that later, because otherwise it would be mixing too many sections with each other. But I would like, why I said I'll pause is because this is category 3, compartmentalization 3, where this clause D has been brought about, because earlier which was there only till clause C. So there is relate to the assessee was there till, after that this has been brought about. So again, 148A, the procedure we have just seen. What is the procedure which needs to be followed? One, there's a proviso. There is till category 2 matters. There was only A, B, C which was there. Category 3, there is clause D also, which has been inserted with for the notices which will be issued on or after 1st April 22. In those cases, in these cases, A to C for category 2, A to D for category 3, 148A procedure is not required to be followed, because what it says is provided that the provisions of this section shall not apply. It says shall not apply. So that is, this procedure is not required to be followed in these cases. And we have seen what are these cases. These cases are clause A, a search is initiated under 132 or books of accounts or the documents which are requisitioned under 132A. The assessing officer satisfied. This is again in the case of money, bullion, jewelry, or any other article or thing. In the case of any person who has been searched under 132 or requisitioned under 132A, in the case of any other person on or after 1st April 21 belongs to the assessee. Clause C is the assessing officer is satisfied with the prior approval of the principal commissioner or commissioner that any books of accounts or the documents seized in 132 or requisitioned on 132A in the case of any other person on or after 1st April 21 pertains or pertain to an information relating to relates to the assessee. So ABC, and then as I said, clause D. And then there is an explanation below this which says, for the purposes of this section, specified authority means the specified authority referred to in section 151. Now, I will deal with this section 151 as well. Now, what we had seen before also, when there was a specific authority which was mentioned, as I said, had been struck off over here with the approval of the specified authority. I had said that I will come to this specific authority. So specific authority, and for this entire section, as I said, there's an explanation below it which says has been defined under section 151. We will go to the specific authority later on. So this is again, to do a quick recap, 147, 148, as I said, we will deal with later, because first we need to see over there. After we had seen 148, it says the 148A procedure has to be complied with. We have seen what is the procedure under 148A, that is ABCD, which is there. He passes an order under 148AD that it is a fit case for issuing a notice. Then we have also dealt with the proviso, which says what are the conditions in which the 148A provision is not required to be followed to. So as I said, this is so, and also we have categorized it into the different categories, category 2 and category 3. As I said, category 3 included this 148A proviso, which is that clause D was there. So this is also not required. 135A, I said, I'll come to it later. So this is the brief discussion on this. And then also let's complete what is 148B. It says, so again, 148B, prior approval for assessment, reassessment or recomputation in certain cases. So this again has been inserted. It says that no order of assessment or reassessment or recomputation under this act shall be passed by an assessing officer below the rank of the Joint Commissioner in respect of an assessment year to which clause 1 or clause D or clause 3, clause 4 of explanation 2 to section 148 shall apply, except with the prior approval of the additional commissioner or additional director or joint commissioner or joint director. So before again, see, I'm repeating things because these things, when we are reading the act, we are seeing that there is a lot of, as I said, there are technical issues, that when a permission is required from which authority, and approval for passing an assessment which is required from the various authorities. We have also seen the time limits which were there, 7 days, 30 days. You ask for the time limit can also be extended. So these things have also, again, I'm saying, have to be seen, have to be looked into when the assessment orders are being prepared. Now, next is time limit for issue of notice, which will again take a lot of time, because I think this is what would be the heart of the discussions of 148, because I'm sure there are various questions as to what would be covered, 50 lakhs or more, whether it has to be seen in aggregate, whether it has to be seen separately, what are the changes, what happens in a search, what happens in a reopening, and so on and so forth. So as I said, this will be the heart. I shall come to this, but before that, I will just quickly complete 148, because as I had said that 148 we will deal after we have seen 148A, because the procedure of 148A was required to be followed, and therefore from 148 I straight away jump to 148A. Now this would make the provisions of 148 clear. What it says: before making the assessment, reassessment or recomputation under section 148 and subject to the provisions of section 148A. So 148A, we have just seen what it says. We have seen A to D, he has to pass the order, and we have also seen the proviso which accepts is EXCEPT except, which says that these are not required to be followed in those cases. The assessing officer shall serve on the assessee a notice along with the copy of the order, as I said, 148AD order, requiring him to furnish within such period as may be specified in such notice a return of his income or the income of any other person in respect of which he is assessable under this act during the previous year corresponding to the relevant assessment year in the prescribed form and verified in the prescribed manner, and setting forth such other particulars as may be prescribed, and the provisions of this act shall apply. So this is as regards the return. So after having got the order under 148A(d), with this 148 notice is issued, you file your return of income in respect of these provisions. And again, see, in the good old days, category 1, we used to say that, okay, treat my original return of income as return in response to 148 notices. Now that has been dispensed with. You have to file your return of income. You just could not have said that, okay, my return of originally returned be considered as return in response to 148, and now you give me the reasons. No, those, as I said, those were the good old days, good old provisions, category 1 cases. Now, this is, you have to file your return of income in response to this, and so on and so forth. And then there is this proviso, provided that no notice under this section shall be issued unless there is information with the assessing officer which suggests that income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment in the case of an assessee for the relevant assessment year, and the assessing officer has obtained prior approval. Again, these are all the approval and so forth. Now, there is, with effect from Finance Act 22, that is 1st April 22, category 3 cases, there is this new proviso which says, provided further that no such approval shall be required where the assessing officer with the prior approval of the specific authority has passed an order under clause D of section 148A to the effect that it is a fit case to issue a notice under this section. So this is what 148. So it says that provided that further that no such approval shall be required. It says no such approval where the assessing officer with the prior approval of the specific authority has passed an order under section 148A to the effect that it is a fit case to, as I was saying, there has been so many approvals which have been given, which are required, the assessing officer is required to follow. And those technicals are also to be seen in this proviso. They have dispensed with where the approval has been taken by the assessing officer with the specific authority where he was passing an order under 148A, because over there it was there. So they have said that again, it is not required to be followed. Explanation 1, it says, for the purpose of this section and section 148A, the information with the assessing officer which suggests that the income chargeable to escaped assessment means. Now again, I would like to pause over here. It says means. Now there has been, as I said, there are various decisions one can say. Now means that this is it. It is not includes. Had it been includes, it would have been considered to be inclusive, and therefore others could have also, which were in those category, could have been included. Once it says means, we have to restrict it to only these. It cannot be beyond these. So once we are, again, when we are seeing the reopening notices, we have to see whether these are the cases which are there. And if it is so, it has to fall under these type, in these categories only. It cannot be on the basis of anything else, because it says means and does not say include. It says any information. Now I have struck off this. It is the earlier which was mentioned was flagged in the case of an assessee for the relevant assessment in accordance with the risk management strategy formulated by the board from time to time. Now, these were there for category 2, one can say, that is 1st April 21 to 31st March 22. Now the word flagged has been removed, removed from the act, which is for category 3 cases. So if there were 148 notices which was received, which were for category 2, you should have seen whether it was for an information which has flagged in the case of an assessee for the relevant assessment. If it was not flagged, it could not have been. But now the word flagged has been removed. Second, again, there is a change over here as well. It says what was there earlier. I'll just read that. So earlier was any final objection raised by the comptroller and audit general. That is what was there for category 2. Any final objection raised by the comptroller and audit general of India to the effect that the assessment in the case of the assessee for the relevant assessment year has not been made in accordance with the provisions of the Act. This was what was there, which was there prior. Now, what is there today? That is category 3, 1st April 22 notices. It says any audit objection to the effect that the assessment in the case of the assessee for the relevant assessment year has not been made in accordance with the provisions of the Act. So this also one needs to be seen whether it was there or it was not there. Any information, then there is clause 3, which says any information received under an agreement referred to in section 90 or 90A of the Act, or any information made available to the assessing officer under the scheme notified under 135A of the Act, or any information which requires action in consequence of the order of the tribunal or a court. So this is what was there, what is, as I said, the changes, some changes which have been brought about and which is there from 1st April 22, and also some changes which was there from the Finance Act 21 itself, which is also given over here. Then we would see over here also explanation 2, which says, for the purpose of this section, where a search is initiated under section 132 or books of accounts, other documents or any assets are requisitioned under section 132A on or after 1st April 21 in the case of an assessee, or a survey is conducted under section 133A other than under subsection 2A. Now what was there? Or subsection 5. Now subsection 5 has been removed. It was there, as I said, in category 2 cases. Over here now it's not there, of that section, on or after 1st April 21 in the case of an assessee, or the assessing officer is satisfied with the prior approval of the, again this is I'm reading this, with the prior approval of the principal commissioner or commissioner, that any money, bullion, jewelry or other valuable article or thing seized or acquisition under section 132 or 132A in the case of any other person on or after 1st April 21 belongs to the assessee, or the assessing officer is satisfied with the prior approval of the principal commissioner or commissioner that any books of accounts or documents or acquisition under section 132 or under 132A in the case of any other person on or after 1st April 21 pertain to or any information contained therein relate to the assessee. Or now again over here also there are changes. Clause 4. I'm reading this and then we will discuss this in detail. So it says that the assessing officer is satisfied with the prior approval of principal commissioner or commissioner that any books of accounts or the documents seized or acquisition under 132, this we have seen, the assessing officer shall be deemed to have information. It will be deemed that he has information. So this is what all the explanation was all about, that as to what would be considered, that this will be considered that he deems to have information which suggests that income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment in the case of an assessee, where the search is initiated or books of accounts or the documents or any assets or acquisition or surveys conducted in the case of an assessee, or money, bullion or jewelry or other valuable article or thing, or books of accounts are seized or acquisition in the case of any other person. What has been struck off is for the 3 years immediately preceding the relevant assessment year prior to the relevant previous year in which. So this was there previously from 1st April 21. Now this from 1st April 22 has been struck off. Again, explanation 3 is about what is a specific authority. Specified authority means the authority referred to in section 151. So we have seen what is 148A. Then we have also again come back to 148, where it says that what would be the provision which has to be followed. That is, we have to file our return of income. Then there is explanation below that which says what would be deemed to be an information. As I said, even the 132 assessments, 132 the 132, that is search assessments, which were there earlier. We had 153A. In case of a person other than the person who has been searched, he was having 153C. Now with the new provisions of 148A coming in, the new provisions have to be followed. And again, the notice under 148A, which is there, has to be also seen whether it is for 1st April 21 to 31st March 22, or it is from now on, that is 1st April 22 to whatever is there. So as I said, there is a sea change, one can say, in the reopening notices, in the assessments which are being there, which will be there for the reopening matters. In the search assessments will also be now covered by 148A. So when we are receiving the notice, everything, every minute detail has to be looked into, whether the time limit which has been given to me has been properly given, whether the approval is from the specific authority or no, whether our case falls under the case where the deeming provisions of information with the assessing officer has been considered. So there are so many things one can see, one has to see. And we see our clients getting the notice and getting anxious and giving us a call and say, "Arey, ye new reopening ki notice aa gayi hai, ye kya hai, ye kaise hua hai, kyun hua hai?" So again, Now you have to, when a doctor sees his patient, he sees as to what is there. So he says that, okay, this is there with you. Similarly is with the 148 provisions. You just cannot say that, okay, we are done with the good old days where we were having the notices, we were filing response, and we were taking the reasons and so on and so forth. Now you are seeing, we are seeing the act. There are so many changes, there are so many things which the assessing officer is required to follow. A simple thing, a DIN has to be also generated, a document identity, a notice which is without a DIN, false, is fail. So many permissions required, so many things which says that the information. So what I'm trying to say over here is that when our client says that, okay, ye mere ko notice aayi hai, ye kya cheez hai, kya hai, just by picking up the phone and you advising over the phone, I personally believe that how do you do that? It's not possible. It's not, because you leave one thing and the assessment could have failed. The reopening provisions, be it under 132 or 130, whatever, 130, 148A, whatever was there, they fail. So you have to see the notices, whether it is covering all aspects, whether it is by the 148A has been followed, whether the information is there or not there. What are the cases where it is deemed that the information is there with the assessing officer? So lot of things. Let's do it with an examples. Now, supposing a builder has been searched, okay, and in the search of the builder, there is, say, diaries which have been found of cash, which says that, okay, these are the persons from whom the builder has received on money, and those persons from whom the on money has been received, the assessing the assessing officer who has done the search party has shared it with the assessing officer of these respective parties, and the assessing officer issues the 148A notices. So whether the information is there. See, I will deal with both these cases. I will deal with when we are dealing with the time limit for issuance of notice, because over there it specified everything. But what I'm trying to say is whether it would be deemed to be considered an information, whether it will not be deemed to be considered an information, what is there, again, approval of the specific authority, everything has to be seen. And after having seen that, it is only then the assessing officer can issue a 148 notice to you. That is 148A provision and 147 notice he can issue to you. So having complied with 148A, 148 and 147 notice then being coming to you, you go ahead. So this I'm just giving an example that how do you go about in the cases of the person who has been searched and so on and so forth. Now let's come to the provisions of section 149, time limit for issue of notice. We have seen what is 148, 148A, 147. Now what is the time limit? As I had said that this is the heart, one of the crucial things which one wanted to see, because see, we receive again, clients ask us whether he could have issued it 10 saal ho gaye hain, 6 saal ho gaye hain, what was the meaning of all those things. So let's see this and as to what the provisions say. Again, I'm repeating at the cost of repetition, don't mind, but you have to have categories in your mind: category 1, category 2 and category 3, because there is a lot of changes from 1st April 21 to 31st March 22, that is category 2 notices, and also category 3 notices which I was just saying. So have these things in mind when we are doing the time limit, because that will be the basis, that would be the crux. Sorry, so coming here, what does it say? That no notice under 148 shall be issued for the relevant assessment year if 3 years have elapsed from the end of the relevant assessment year, unless the case falls under clause B. So as I was saying, what was there in earlier provisions was, we are all aware that, sorry, what was there in the earlier provision, we are aware that reopening notices could have been, I'll deal with those first and then come over here. The reopening notices could have been issued for 4 years if income chargeable to tax as escaped assessment is 1 lakh. And then from 4 to 6 years only, where there was more than 1 lakh which was there, which is of the income which has escaped assessment. And obviously 16 is in the case of foreign assets and so on. I'm not going to deal with the exceptional cases of 16 years and all, because unnecessarily we would digress into another aspect altogether. So let's concentrate on our things to 4 years where there was one only, and 4 to 6 years where there is more than 1 lakh. This is what was the old provisions of 148. So coming again, if 3 years have elapsed from the end of the relevant assessment year, unless the case falls under clause B. Now, what is in clause B also? What is there? There is a change which has been done from category 2 to category 3. First, let's see what was there in category 2. It says if 3 years, I'm reading the old one. It says if 3 years but not more than 10 years have elapsed from the relevant assessment year, unless the assessing officer has in his possession books of accounts, other documents or evidence which reveal that the income chargeable to tax represent in the form of an asset. What was there over there was represented in the form of an asset which has escaped assessment, amounts to or is likely to amount to 50 lakh or more for that year. This was there in the category 2 matters. Now, what is there in the notices which will be issued from 1st April 22 is if 3 years, I'm just reading it from the screen. The old one I read it from the statute. It says if 3 years but not more than 10 years have elapsed from the end of the relevant assessment year, unless the assessing officer has in his possession books of accounts, other documents or evidence which reveal that the income chargeable to tax represent in the form of an asset was only mentioned, which has escaped assessment or is likely to amount to 50 lakhs or more for that year. Now, what does the new one says? It says if 3 years but not more than 10 years have elapsed from the end of the relevant assessment year, unless the assessing officer has in his possession books of accounts or other documents or evidence. Now, let's see this. And let's try and give meaning to these, what they are trying to say. In his possession, books of accounts. Now, books of accounts are the books of accounts which are being maintained by the assessee. Let's say, for example, books of accounts would be the tally books of accounts, one can say, which are being mentioned, or any other software which is being used by our clients to record the books of accounts. Then it says, or other documents. Now, what could be the other documents? Let's take an example. Let's take an example. An agreement for sale has been found, or a power of attorney giving someone the power to enter into a transaction, if that has been found, or other document. Which when it says other document, is a document which is of these nature, where there are parties involved, where it has been a registration has been done to that effect, and so on and so forth, would be other document. Then it says or evidence. Now, what does evidence mean? Evidence could be, let's say, for example, loose papers which have been found, or for example, diary which have been found. So all these have been covered: books of accounts or other document or evidence. So which reveal that the income chargeable to tax represented in the form of an asset. As I said, over there it was only asset. Over there, meaning in category 2, that is 1st April 21 to 31st March 22, only an asset was there. If suppose it was not represented in the form of an asset, then the provisions would fail. Then because it has to be over here. If it was not, then one could have taken that plea. But now the Act in its wisdom has also included expenditure in respect of a transaction or in relation to an event or an occasion, which was not there earlier, as I said, for category 2. An entry or entries in the books of account, then which has escaped assessment or is likely to amount to 50 lakhs or more for that year, has also been struck off. So over there, when we were reading, we had seen, that is category 2, we had seen that for that year was mentioned, meaning it has to be so form. So I'll just give I'll try and give the meaning to this. When we were to go from 3 to 10, each year had to be seen separately for notices which were there for category 2, 1st April 21 to 31st March 22. Now coming to 1st April 22 notices which would be there, it can go to from 3 to 10 only in respect, it has to be seen 50 lakhs has not to be seen for that year. It can be also seen in aggregate. That is for to mean that suppose, say for example, year 4 is 10 lakhs, year 5 is say 40 lakhs. So it has to be seen 10 plus 40, 50 lakhs in aggregate. It will not be seen for that year. So coming again. So dealing with these, we will see the proviso. Proviso also says that now, so this was there for from 3 years and then 3 to 10 years. Now let's see what does the proviso say. It says, again, proviso also there is a change for category 2 notices as well as category 3. It says, provided that no notice under section 148 shall be issued at any time in a case for the relevant assessment year. Assessment year. Provided that, now I'll just read what was the old provision. Old says such notice could not have been issued at any time on account of being beyond the time limit specified under the provisions of subclause B of subsection 1 of this section. Now this, mind well, all the things which we were seeing that they were applicable from 1st April 22, if at all there were any changes. Now this proviso has been brought into the statute books from retrospective effect from Finance Act 21. So as to say, category 2 and category 3 would be similar in nature, because this has really given meaning to what was happening earlier of beyond 3 years to 10 years and so on. So this proviso which is there, which is a notice, I'll just read this. It says a notice under 148 or 153A or 153C could not have been issued at any time on account of being beyond the time limit specified under the provisions of clause B of subsection 1 of this section of section 153A or 153C, as the case may be, as they stood immediately prior to the. So they have only tried to give proper explanation to this, which was there, which was always there in the statute books. Now, let me give an example to this and try and explain these things. As I said, let's take up that we were on 31st March 21. Now, when we are on 31st March 21, we are, I'm repeating, we are on category 1. If we are on category 1, we are to see on 31st March whether the reopening notices can be issued as per the old thing which was there. 4 years and more than 4 years to 6 years. If it is more than 1 lakh, within 4 years is 1 lakh. So on 31st March, we had to see that. From 1st April, so on 31st March 21, the assessing officer could have reopened the assessment till assessment year 14-15. Only assessment year 14-15 and ahead of 14-15. Now, from 1st April 21. So this was till 31st March 21. From 1st April 21, we had the provisions of 148A coming in. However, see again on 31st March 21, which was there, and which were, suppose you were, so on 31st March 21, the 132 notices which were 132 which was there, a search which was there, and pursuant of which the assessment was under 153A, they were all governed over there. So as to say, 148 and 148A were not, 148A was not in the statute books on 31st March, so they have to be seen over there. However, for 148 notices from 1st April 21, these have to be read. And for the new, the proviso which is there below this section, as I said, there is a retrospective effect. So no notices could have been issued over here as well. And we have seen what these provisions is about. So this is what the compartmentalization is for up to 3 years, from 3 to 10, and also where a notice, provided that no notice it says provided that no notice can be issued where your case is. So for the searches 31st March 21, you have to see over there was 153A, which says the time limit of 10 years and so on. Over there you have to see it, because on 31st March 21, the 153 the search assessment on 132 was as per 153A. From 1st April 21, it has to be seen over here. So from here, the extended period will not be allowed. It says provided that no notice shall be allowed. No notice shall be issued at any case in a case for the relevant assessment year beginning. So there was this proviso, as I said, has been amended, but with a retrospective effect from 1st April 21, only to make things clearer. I hope this would cover your arguments for 3 years and up to 10 years and so on and so forth. So you have to see when the notice has come and as to what would be applicable to you, and accordingly decide the course of the limits of 50 lakhs and so on. As I said, there's only one change for that year. Now this, I'm again repeating, for that year has not been brought about retrospectively, is only for 1st April 22. Whereas this, which has been brought about with a retrospective change. So this needs to be kept in mind. Provided further that the provisions of subsection subsection will not apply in case where a search under 153A, a notice under 153A or 153C, read with section 153A is required to be issued in relation to a search initiated under section 132 or books of accounts, other documents, any asset requisition under 132A on or before 31st March 21. This is what I just read, that if it is category 1, you have to see those matters. And if you have to see those matters, you have to see the provisions of section 153A, and 153A gave the time limit of 10 years over there. And if it was over from that period, you have to see it in respect of those things. If the search is from 1st April 21 or a reopening from 1st April 21, you have to see this accordingly, and no notice can be issued, and this proviso makes those things clear. Reading ahead, provided also that for the purpose of computing the period, now this is this will be getting into the nitty-gritties of as to what would be the time period which has to be included, not included, and the extended time which the assessing officer gets, and so on and so forth. So so I'll just again do a quick recap for this time limit, because as I said, this would be the very basis. So one can say that in a case where a search or acquisition under section 132 or 132A, the assessment and issuance of notice was governed by 153A prior to the amendment brought about in the Finance Act 21 by section 149(1)(b). So prior to that, you have to see the provisions of 153A and so on and so forth. One can say, therefore, in the case of a search assessment under 132, made on or after 1st April 21, the assessment for all or any of the 10 years can be reopened without getting to see as to whether if they could have been reopened under the old provisions or not. This is about the time limit which has been prescribed for the reopening notices as well as for the search assessments, as I said, under 153A, which is on the new provision, the 148, which is to be there. 153A was for the person who has been searched, and 153C was for the person other than the person who searched, but the papers and documents belong to him. So this was what was, as I said, would be the heart of our discussion. Now coming to the time limit for issue of notices. Now this is provided also that for the purpose of computing the period of limitation as per this section. Now we were seeing that there was time limit of 7 days, 7 to 30 days, and so on and so forth. The time or the extended time allowed to the assessee as per the show cause notice issued under clause B. Now we will again go to what is clause B, because over there, as I had said, the time limit of 7 days and 30 days was mentioned. I'll read this. It says, provide an opportunity to the assessee from the date on which such notice is issued of such time. Now over here, it had mentioned that the time which is specified cannot be less than 7 days and cannot be more than 30 days. from the date on which such notice is issued. However, this time period can be extended by making an application. Now, time limit, because as I said, the time limit, the extended time period, here is where the assessing officer is getting the leeway, one can say over here. It says provided also that for the purpose of computing the period of limitation as per the section, because the assessing officer, you had seen in 148A(d) that he was to pass an order, and that order has to be also passed within such time period which is prescribed over there. I'll read this, refer to over here. Pass an order with the prior approval of the specified authority from 1 month from the end of the month in which the reply has been filed by us objecting to the reopening, or where no such reply is furnished within 1 month from the time in which the time or the extended time allowed to the assessee to furnish a reply expires. So there are time limits which has been set out both over there. Now, what does this says? It says provide also that for the purpose of computing the period of limitation as per this section, the time or the extended time allowed to the assessee as per the show cause notice issued under clause B of section 148A, or the period during which the proceeding under 148 is stayed by an order or injunction of any court shall be excluded. So this time period, in calculating the time period which is there, which is provided under clause B and clause D, clause B shall be excluded. Now, what about clause D? Clause D is there in the next thing. It says provided also that where immediately after the exclusion of the period referred to in the immediately preceding proviso, the period of limitation available to the assessing officer for passing an order under clause D of section 148A is less than 7 days, such remaining period shall be extended to 7 days. So if suppose there is no time limit, so this will get extended, and the period of limitation under this section shall be deemed to be extended accordingly for him to issue the notice. So this again, as I said, this is there. These are the provisos which are there below these sections. Now, explanation. Now this again is there. Explanation says for the purpose of clause B of this section, asset. Now asset has been defined. What it says is asset shall include. Now this is again an inclusive of the definition, one can say. Immovable property being land or building or both, shares and securities, loans and advances, deposits in bank account. It is an inclusive definition, but this is what has been defined. Again, I'm going back. What was the old thing was, from 1st April 21 to that is category 2 matters, only an asset was mentioned in clause B, whereas now there is a change which they have included expenditure in respect of a transaction or in relation to this, and entry in the books of accounts which has escaped assessment or likely to accept. Now, see, trying to give meaning to this, what are they really trying to do? What are they now? Supposing let's take an example that there is a search which has been carried out, and there are newspapers which have been found which show that there was cash which was received. However, now this cash which is received as per the newspapers or diaries which are there, it is quite possible that cash, when the search team comes, is not found. Now, what happens? What happens is that the assessment we've seen would probably fail, because on various technical grounds, one can say that okay, there were newspapers which were found, a statement of the directors were recorded, the directors would later on probably retract to the statement, and the courts would say that okay, what is the statement was there, but then what happened? There was nothing of cash which was found in the course of search. And so what do you do? Now, with this, what I can try, if I can try to give meaning to, is what they are trying to do is that okay, this is the newspapers and diaries which have been found. Now, there are what is possible of this on money, one can say, which has been received. Now, either this on money which is received gets represented in the form of an asset, that okay, this that suppose it was used further and an asset was purchased. or it could be that an expenditure in respect of a transaction, expenditure in respect of a transaction in relation to an event or occasion. So this was there, and there was probably a noting in the diary to the effect that there is a cash which is sitting in the credit. With this, there is an expenditure which has been done to the debit, one can say, on the left hand side, and there was an expenditure in relation, or an entry or entries in the books of accounts. So it has to fall in this. So this is why they are trying to cover up these aspects, which would, really speaking, would fail in the earlier things, where they would find the papers and documents or the diaries, and because there was no cash, there was no cash which was found, and there was nothing which could be substantiated with the thing. It was only the statement which was there, and the assessments would get fail, and there was revenue loss. So probably this is what they are trying to give more meaning, detailed meaning, one can say, to these things, and therefore their emphasis is on that. Coming back, so what, and then what is an asset? As I said, asset has been given an inclusive meaning. It says an immovable property being land or building or both, shares and securities, loans and advances, deposits and bank account. Now the question, the question immediately which can come up in the mind is, what if suppose this is there which is not being represented in any of these forms? So what would happen is, whether their assessments, whether these would fail. So yes, this is something where it will again have to be seen from case to case basis, but that is for sure that it has to be within these framework. If it is not, then you can have, one can say, a place where you can have your arguments or have your stand. And coming to this change, this is 1A. This is again for category 3, that is with effect from 1st April 22. It is not that it is with retrospective effect. We have seen that up until now only there was one retrospective effect, which was the first proviso below section 149, which says that the notice could not have been issued because they had made it things clear. On 1st April 21, when the notices were being issued, it was not clear, and therefore they have brought about clarity, and they have brought about the clarity with retrospective amendment. This is what needs to be kept in mind. So coming back over here, it says, as I said, this is for only with effect from 1st April 22. Notwithstanding anything contained in subsection 1, where the income chargeable to tax represented in the form of an asset or expenditure in relation to an event or occasion of the value referred to in clause B of subsection 1 has escaped assessment, and the investment in such asset or expenditure in relation to such event or occasion has been made or incurred in more than one previous year relevant to the assessment year within the period referred to in clause B of subsection 1, a notice shall be issued for each and every assessment year. See, we have seen time and again that there are sometimes that there is overlapping for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, which are there in this period of more than 3 years, that is from 4 to 10 years. So in those cases, for each and everything, or each and every year, the notices would be issued because of the overlapping. So this is, as I said, 1A is only for from 1st April 22. Then the next is the provisions of subsection 1 as to the issue of notice shall be subject to the provisions of section 151. Now, as I said, there are so many sanctions and so many aspects which have been given. Now, sanction for one, we had seen sanction for issue of notice under 151. I had said that I will deal with it, but later. So this is what 151 is about. Now, my emphasis would be over here for 151. But before I go into 151, because I'll take some time in dealing with 151, I'll just quickly complete the other aspects. It is in case of a faceless assessment of income escaping assessment, that is in section 151A, which deals with the provisions which are there. Other provisions are there in 152, and 153 talks about the time limit for completion of the assessment, which is there. So this is I'll deal with 151. This is in nutshell the provisions of section 147, 148, 148A, 149 time limit for issue of notice, and so on. So what would now let's take I will not deal with a search assessment. Let's take an example of reopen assessment where you have received the notice. Sorry, you have received the order under 148AD. You file. And the assessing officer then issues a 147 to you. You file your return of income in response to 148, and then the assessment goes to the National Faceless Assessment Center, where the assessments would get ultimately framed on the basis of everything on the portal and all on the system which is there. This would be the fate of the reopened matters, the income escaping assessment matter. Search assessments, we are all aware, search assessments have been kept out. Search assessments are still on the basis of 1-to-1, where the assessing of your central circle officer is known to you. You go and appear, and the papers and documents and all are filed, and the assessments get completed. And similarly, the appeal also, search appeal, the appeal is again 1-to-1, whereas in the case of the assessments, they are under the faceless appeal regime, and then there is the forum of tribunal. Now, dealing with, so this was all about 147, 148, and now dealing with 151. Which mentions about the specific authority. We had seen, I'll just quickly do a recap, because we had seen specific authority mentioned at various places, and there was some places where the specific authority had been dispensed with as well. Let's take an example. See over here, let's start from 148A, because over there it was mentioned with the approval of the specific authority, though the specific authority, this was for an opportunity of being heard. Category 2 matters which required the approval of the specific authority, that has been dispensed with for category 3. Then again, pass an order by passing an order with the prior approval of the specific authority. Here also we had seen that the 148AD order which the assessing officer passes has to be with the specific permission of the specific authority. Now let's go to see 148. Here also we have seen there was that specific authority had been dispensed with also, where it was not required to obtain the permission from the specific authority. See, we have again, I'm digressing a bit, because we have seen in the category 1 cases where the notice under section 148 was required to be issued by the assessing officer. Over there also there were categories where the assessing officer 4 years, more than 4 years, 4 to 6 years, where the assessing officer is below the rank of the joint commissioner. He had to take the permission of the joint commissioner or the additional commissioner or the commissioner or the chief commissioner, depending on whether the assessment is under 143.3 originally or under 143.1. So there were categories given over there as well. And over there also you would have appreciated that the assessments would sometimes fail, where the assessing officer issuing a notice under section for reopening of assessment had not taken the approval from the proper authority. For example, if he was to take from the commissioner and he would take from the joint commissioner, the assessing officer, the courts have quashed the assessment that if the act had said that you take the approval from the particular authority, and if you do not do so, the assessment was bad in law. In fact, the courts have also come down heavily when they have said that if the permission was required from the joint commissioner or the additional commissioner, and you would go on to take the permission from the commissioner or chief commissioner, the assessing officer had taken from the higher forum. The courts have again come down heavily that if the act had made very clear that you had to take it from the joint commissioner or the additional commissioner, you went to the commissioner, that assessments have also been quashed, saying that no, it was not from the proper authority. Even though you reached to the commissioner, the assessment was held to be bad in law. So when they are saying from the approval, with the approval of the specific authority, it has to be read as per the authority which has been given under section 151, and it has to be read as it is. It cannot be that you give different meaning, and where they have been dispensed with, one can say they have been dispensed with, where we have seen that it has been held that the permission from the respective authorities has been given. But what I'm trying to say is that you have to take from that very authority. Now, what does this say? Now, again, this is something which is one can say I see a lot of litigation or a lot of UN cry, though nothing as of now. But this is something one can say. You will let me see this, let me read this, and then we'll be discussing it. It says specific authority for the purpose of section 148 and 148A shall be principal commissioner or principal director. I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. Specified authority for the purpose of section 148 and section 148A shall be. So for 148 and 148A, they have given the specific authority because, as I showed from 148, and both mention of specific authority, it says principal commissioner or principal director or commissioner or director if 3 years or less than 3 years have elapsed from the end of the relevant assessment year. Clause 2 says principal chief commissioner or principal director general, or where there is no principal commissioner or principal director general, chief commissioner or director general if more than 3 years have elapsed from the end of the relevant assessment year. So if it is 3 years only, principal commissioner, principal director, or principal or commissioner, so on and so forth. Whereas if it is from 3 to 10, it has to be principal chief commissioner. Now, why I say that there could be a lot of now. Let's take an example. Let's take an example that there are reopening notices from 3 years to 10 years. Okay, for clause 2, the approval and all which is mentioned, that is for 148 and 148A, that is sanction, order, and so on and so forth. It says it is the principal chief commissioner. Now, in a city of Mumbai, where where there is only one principal chief commissioner. It is not that there are many principal chief commissioner. There is only one principal chief commissioner. Bombay has one principal chief commissioner. Now, you see the magnitude of matters which would be there, of reopening of 148, which would be there, and the principal chief commissioner is required to do it for the assessment is beyond 3 to 10. How will there be, how humanly it's not possible to have an application of mind in each and every cases. But the statute requires the principal chief commissioner to perform that function. Now, if suppose, let's take an example, if an RTI has been done to ask that principal chief commissioner is required to give as to how many did he do it in a day where he was getting this. And see, we have seen where the assessments getting quashed, where the commissioner used to merely write that, yes, I am satisfied with the reopening notice which is there. And the courts have come heavily saying that, yes, I am satisfied is no satisfaction. There had to be when the statute was giving you, was bestowing upon you that you had to perform a particular function, it had to be with due application of mind. And just by writing this phrase that, yes, you were satisfied, was not good enough. Now, bringing that analogy over here, where the sanction is required for 148 and 148A, B or D, whatever is there. And if it is beyond 3, where the principal chief commissioner is required to perform the function, as I said, that there is only one principal chief commissioner in a city of Mumbai, and he is required to give to so many notices which are beyond 3 to 10. How is it humanly possible to do it with application of mind? And if these points are taken up, again, there would be a lot of litigation to this effect. So this is one thing which I thought that we need to. I thought, see, When it is within 3 years, principal commissioner, there are in city of Bombay or Delhi, one can say any metro city, you would have many principal commissioner. But principal chief commissioner, when it comes to, that is for 3 to 10, it is only one. And for asking one human to do this so much of work, let's see as to how things, because then again the question would be whether there was due application of mine, what happened, how many notices did he give the sanction to in a day, where such things were there. So a provision which we could see in the near future, where let's take for example, when a 148A D order is being passed, and the assessee wants to see it, whether the approval was from the proper chief commissioner, was the due application of mine, and the court then sees those matters in a writ petition, which is, because I said 148A 1D order cannot be challenged in the appellate forum before the CIT appeal or before the tribunal. It will be challenged in the writ petition, and the writ petition are asking these aspects. This I can say that time alone would be the best judge, and time alone would be able to answer these questions as to what would be the fate for these aspects, these matters. So I had read that it was so coming and trying to conclude it in a nutshell. We have seen the old provisions, category 1 matters, which were there earlier, where the notices for reopening was there, as I said, 4 years, 4 to 6 years, and go up to 16 years, where there is represented in the form of a foreign asset. Then we had category 2 matters, which was there, where the statute brought about 148A from 1st April 21, where the 148A procedure has to be followed. Obviously, we have also dealt with the proviso, which accepts, again, EXEPT except where the provisions of 148A are not required to be followed. Then we saw that after 148A 1D order is passed, the 147, the return of income will have to be filed. The good old provisions where we used to just say that the reopening, that the return of income originally be considered is not good enough. You have to file your return of income in time. And we have dealt with these aspects. Then we also dealt with the proviso. There was one proviso which was there, 149. We had dealt, sorry, 148 we had dealt with. We had dealt with the new insertions, that is category 3. Then we also dealt with the time limit, which was there, as I said, 31st March 21 cases, which was there. The search was as per 153A, 153C. Those had to be seen, the time limits which were there, because the 132 was as per those provisions from 1st April 21 to 31st March 22, and from 1st April 22 we have seen there's a retrospective effect which says that provided that no notice can be issued. So it has to be seen what is the case, where it is falling, and so on. We have also dealt with the provisos below 148A. Then, as I said, prior approval of the assessment or reassessment or recomputation in certain cases, which has been brought about, 148B has been dealt with. And then we also dealt with the time limits, as I said, and then also dealt with section 151, which gives the sanction for the issue of notice, which has been mentioned at the respective places. So I had read this somewhere that it is the decision of GK and drive shaft, whether it's the old wine in the new bottle, one can say, and how things will pan out, how the litigation, whether the litigation to this would increase, reduce, or whether there will be on what. And see, you can see on there can be litigation on so many counts, whether it has been proper application of mine. See, I'll again give an example. 148A clause 1 says conduct any inquiry if required. So now this has given the assessing officer the liberty to decide whether an inquiry is required or not required. And if suppose the assessing officer does not do an inquiry and he passes an order, obviously after giving you the information that which he has and you responding to it, and you say that, okay, you should have done the inquiry. You had the information, you should have done the inquiry. If the inquiry is not being done, whether the court will say to the assessing officer, you had the powers of doing an inquiry, why did you not do it? So again, these would be best answered, one can say, with time. And would again come back to where we receive the reopening notices under the new provisions. It has to be seen in detail as to the provisions have been followed, not followed, how the provisions have to be followed, the time limit which is there, which has been set out, extended time period, that is the time period which was there for that period has been excluded for 148A, B, as well as for D. Everything basically in what I'm trying to say has to be seen, the totality of the facts have to be seen, and then proceeded further to go about. So this is what I thought I'll just discuss. Any questions, any aspects? This I have just, as I said, this I'll just quickly run through because this is about the 150, the faceless assessment. As I said, this will be in the form of, after having done all this, the assessments would be done by the Faceless Assessment Center.
Sir, there are some questions.
Yes, please.
I'll read one by one.
Yes.
Notice under section 148A.
I'm extremely sorry, if you don't mind, can I, it is those questions, these are the questions?
In the chat box, and some are in question and answer, sir.
सर आपको इसमें यहाँ पे दिख रहा है सर, आपको क्वेश्चन बॉक्स में दिखेगा ना क्वेश्चन सर?
हाँ, ये क्वेश्चन एंड आंसर बॉक्स वाला है ना जो मैंने अभी
बोला है?
राइट,
बिल्कुल
राइट सर, राइट.
तो सॉरी, आप कौन सा, बिकॉज क्या है इतने बड़े बड़े हैं तो मेरे को भी थोड़ा
सर बेटर
हाँ
दिख रहा है. You can take it sequence wise.
Oh, okay.
Like first is Lakshmikant Kothari.
First is okay. मेरे के लिए रामजी पटेल आ रहे हैं, एक सेकंड. Okay. If the procedure provided in section 148A has not been followed and no writ is filed, can a failure in following the procedure under 148A be challenged before the AO during reassessment proceedings or before CIT appeal in an appeal against the reassessment order? Now, see whether to have understood this 148A procedure, if it was not followed and you have not filed a writ petition and the assessing officer has gone further, would that mean that can you not take up this? You can see that, as I said, it says 148A, the assessing officer shall, before issuing a notice. So it says shall. So it is duty bound to follow that procedure. If he is not followed that procedure, that would not mean that you cannot take up this point before the CIT appeal. You can do it. The question whether can you tell the assessing officer to do it? See, you should, because what would happen is, as I said, after all of this gets collated, it would be the Faceless Assessment Center who would be doing the assessment. And if you tell the assessing officer, Faceless Assessment Officer, that this was not followed and now this should be struck off, see, you should take up these points, whether they happen or not happen. But that would, as I said, by not filing a writ would not mean that you would lose your right, because the procedure has to be followed. It says shall. And if it is not being followed, you can take up these points before the AO, Faceless Assessing Officer who is doing it, or even before your jurisdiction assessing officer who is doing it. If he does it, not does it, that is upon him. But you would certainly not lose that point because the procedure has to be followed. I hope I will. Yeah. Sorry, आप मुझे प्लीज अगर नाम बोलेंगे, because
सर क्वेश्चन आंसर में ना सबसे पहले है लक्ष्मीकांत कोठारी एज पर द रिसेंट स्कीम ऑफ रीअसेसमेंट.
एक सेकंड, तो मैं शायद नीचे पढ़ रहा हूँ क्या? एक सेकंड, आई एम सॉरी, आई थिंक
आप स्क्रॉल करेंगे उसको.
एज पर द रीसेंट स्कीम आप बोल रहे हैं?
हाँ, एज पर द रीसेंट स्कीम ऑफ रीअसेसमेंट, नोटिस अंडर सेक्शन 148 इज रिक्वायर्ड टू बी इशूड बाय.
As per the recent scheme of reassessment, notice under 148 is required to be issued by the National Faceless Assessment Center. However, 148 notices are still issued by the, has the new scheme been notified? This I do not, I will have to check, so I'll not be able to comment on whether the new scheme has been notified or not. So this is something which probably I can check and I can respond to, because I'm not aware, so I'll not be able to say whether it has been notified or it has not been notified.
Okay. Then next is Chetan Patel.
One second. But I'll come to this question after having checked it. I'll just check this, whether the new scheme has been notified for. Sorry, then is Mr. Chetan Patel.
Was the ready?
That's what's the remedy available, right?
Remedy available for.
If an order is passed under 144A, assessee has not submitted any reply. So, no, 144 is a best judgment assessment, as assessee has not submitted any reply to. So, if you have not replied to the 148A, as it says that the show cause was issued to you, you had been given a chance. If suppose everything is there properly mentioned, that is that the assessing officer has, so you would be on a weaker footing, one can say, because immediately the question would be that you were given a chance to respond to by virtue of 148AB. You did not exercise it, and then the assessing officer, having considered A, B, and clause C, passed an order under 148AD, and a best judgment assessment happened under 144. So you would, what's the remedy is, it depends on what the case of the matter is. But yes, you would be on a weaker footing.
Yes, then Chirag Zaveri.
Okay, there is no search or seizure. Whether note under 148 can now be 148A for assessment of 1213 and 1415 are found. Okay, now let's this. Sorry. Yeah, I'll share the there's a message for sharing of PPT. I'll share it with WIRC forum, and they'll do the needful. Mr. Chirag Zaveri, yeah. So now let's see this question. There is no search or seizure. Whether notice under 148 can now be issued on 9th April 22. So we are on 9th April 22. After following the provisions of section 148A for assessment year 13-14 and 14-15, if alleged bogus purchase of more than 50. One second, yeah. If alleged bogus purchase of more than 50 lakhs are found. Now, as I said, we will break this into three things. Now please come to the time limit which is mentioned, provided that no notice under section 148 shall be issued at any time in a case for the relevant assessment year beginning on or before 1st day of April 21. So your notice is coming on 9th April 22, that is beginning after on or in a case for the relevant assessment year beginning on or before 1st April 21, if a notice under 148A, 148 or 153A or 153C could not have been issued at that point of time on account of being beyond the time limit specified under the provisions of clause B of section 1 of this section of 153A or Finance Act 153, as the case may be. So by virtue of this, the assessing officer cannot issue a notice under or for assessment year 13-14 or 14-15, because on 1st April 21, 14-15 has gone away with. See, 6 years have gone away with. So if he could not have done it, now he cannot give the extended time period to this. So for 13-14 and 14-15, even if it is beyond 50 lakhs, he cannot get the right to do it. Therefore, I said, see, you will have to read everything with the so with in which compartment it is fitting as per the thing. So by virtue of this proviso, he will not be able to do so. I hope I'm done with this question. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sorry, yeah. So आपके पास अभी नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन कौन सा? एक्चुअली मेरे पास थोड़े कौन सा?
सर चिराग जवाहरी का ही नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन है, देन
हाँ,
लक्ष्मी।
एक सेकंड, चिराग जवाहरी के 2-3 क्वेश्चन है, एक सेकंड उसकी। ये नोटिस अंडर 148 डेटेड ये वाला,
हाँ,
notice under section 148 dated 30th June 21 for assessment year 13-14 is quashed by Honorable High Court in writ. Can the AO now issue the notice after strictly following the procedure under section 148A for the assessment year 13-14? See now, ये जो है ना, it is little. See, you have to see on 30th June 21 for assessment year 13-14. Now, this was quashed by the High Court in writ. I think if I can give meaning to this, it was quashed because from 1st April 21, category 2 matters which were there, 148 was not followed. So he was trying to do it in category 1. Now, for those things, if he will issue a notice to you by doing it under 148A for assessment year 13-14, he will not be able to, because 14-15 has been till 14-15 is what he can do it, and ahead 13-14 has been gone away with, so he will not be able to do anything to that effect. Read this with the breakups and you would get it. So he would not be able to do it with this.
The next one is Lakshmikant Kothari. Is inquiry for purpose of 148A to be conducted under section?
Lakshmikant Kothari is inquiry. 1 second. Actually, इनके 3-4 है, तो मुझे
सर वही सीक्वेंस में 12:32 वाला है,
12:32 वाला।
हाँ,
ये वाला is inquiry. Yes, मिल गया।
yes.
Is inquiry for the purpose of section 148A required to be conducted under section 133(6)? No, is inquiry for the purpose of section 148A required to be conducted under 133. 133(6) is calling for the information required to be conducted. So see, 148A, sorry, okay, having to understood it. It says conduct any inquiry if required. Now it does not say whether it can be only by 130. It can be by any mode that he wishes to do the inquiry. See, it is not that he can do it only by 133(6), or it is an inquiry. He can even send his inspector and do the inquiry. Okay. Now, but what is required is that this inquiry which is conducted, he should give it to you. That is what clause B says, that provide an opportunity to the assessee to respond to this together with the inquiry, if any, which has been conducted as per clause A. That is what B mentioned. So he just cannot do the inquiry. He can do it by 133(6). He can do it by sending his inspector and any other aspects which one can think of. But what is important is, having done the inquiry, he has to give it to me, that he cannot keep it, because that is what the principles of natural justice demand. So can he do it by 133(6)? Yes, he can do it. He can do it by any form that he wishes to. Yes. Because that is not what has been mentioned as to what procedure he has to follow. It has to be inquiry, a proper inquiry and that be given to me.
Then under that, Chirag, 1237.
1237, yeah. Notice under 148 is issued on 26 March. It is pursuant to notice under section 148, which gives only 6 days. What compliance the assessee should now make? Now see, if it has given less, that is, so the minimum period which was there was 7 days. Now, having not done so, the notice under section 148A has not followed the due procedure. So you can take up these points and hope for that the assessment, as I said, these technical issues, time alone would be able to say as to these procedures which are mentioned from the permission of the specific authority or for the time limit which is mentioned, which says that this has to be done, minimum of 7 days has to be allowed. And if that does not, so whether the court would say that, okay, let the extended period be allowed, or whether the assessment should be cost per se, that would be on the for the domain of the court to decide as to what would happen. If and 1238,
Yes.
if an asset generated as a result after 10 years from the end of the ML. No, that is what I said. See, if an asset generated as a result of income escape, this is a little general question, because you would have to see as to when is this asset generated, as it says after 10 years from the end. What is it that made him to believe that this is there, and how things have happened would be important to see that the reassessment is possible or not possible. I'm sorry, but it will be a little general to discuss because various facts will have to be once considered for this aspect. So one then is the 1240, right? Yeah, Abhishek, right? Old section 158, due to pandemic, various due dates for issuing were given extension. Such cases, due to extension, the limitation was extended. Yeah, sanction and everything was required, and sanction and has to be there. It cannot. There was nothing which can say that sanctions will not required to be now taken up. You have the sanctions and all, though the time limits was getting extended, would not mean that the sanctions will go away with. See, the sanctions are there so as to protect the assessee from arbitrary reopening of assessment. And if it is there for protection of assessee from arbitrary reopening, they have to be duly followed. If 1244 again, Lakshmikant Bhutaj, right?
Yes.
If the reassessment jurisdiction is challenged before the CITP on the premise that the required procedure 148 is not followed, can CITP refuse to? A procedure was followed after the approval of the specified authorities are not junior to him. See, can CITP refuse to intervene on the premise that 148 procedure was followed after them? See, if CIT appeal whether they followed the juniors and all these things, mind well that the CIT appeal, though is an authority under the Income Tax Act, but see, he is sitting as in an appeal forum, and whether these juniors to him, that is the additional and the joint commissioner or the ACDC, whichever is there, if they are required to follow a particular procedure, they are required to. He cannot say that junior, because see, they are not officers, one can say, who are junior to him in his hierarchy. He is sitting in the appellate chair. So just to say that they have the specific authority followed by the juniors to him is not, according to me, would not be sufficient. What is the remedy available under 140 stating that nothing received? So if you have not received anything, wait for it, because if suppose it is quite possible that after having after having done that, 148A order has been passed, and probably in the 148 order he has dropped it. That is what one can believe, because otherwise if he would have 148A, so 148A has to be an order. So what does the order say? Does it say that okay, it is satisfied with what we are saying, and therefore a 148 notice is not being issued to you to file your return of income, or does it say to file? It cannot be that. What I'm trying to say is that 148A(d) order will specify as to what it has to happen. And it says that if nothing has been received from the assessee, but if you had filed things to that effect, you will have to file it to the writ petition to the court, saying that this is what was mentioned in response to what was asked to me. I had filed to this, and still a 148A(d) order has been passed saying that nothing has been filed. You will have to go in a writ petition and explain this to the high courts. To the court, the respective high court, that this is what has happened. if you had filed a reply, and that was not considered in the 148 AD order. Why is it compulsory to file a return of income under 148 in a new procedure? Yes, it is. As I said, you cannot just say that my original return be ITO from Mumbai takes approval of, is this correct? No, he'll have to take it from the, but in what context? If you're asking from the context of the specific authority which is mentioned, he will have to, his specific authority is principal CCIT Mumbai and not Delhi. If the case falls in second compartment and notice on 48A has not been issued, okay, therefore approval of competent authority, then the order under 148A has. Yes, so if it was, if it is the second compartment, and if it has not been issued before approval of the competent authority, which was there at that point of time, and then you get an order, irrespective of the order being passed on 6th April 22, that is in the third compartment, what has to be seen is from the point of view of second compartment notice, and if it is not good, the assessment order ought to be quashed. Whether old case laws will be applicable to the newly inserted section. This is again a little generic. This I'll not be able to. The case laws would hold good, because see, when the courts had said that what was the meaning of the commissioner or the chief commissioner applying his mind and giving the satisfaction and then sanction and so on. So yes, those would still prevail. It is not that because. But it is not that those case laws are done away with. Those would, because ultimately courts would refer to those decisions which was passed in their wisdom at that point of time. So they would be there. But it would also depend on what the facts are, whether you are challenging something, say, for example, a case where time limit is there, say 6 days, which was just mentioned above. And if you challenge that, what would courts do to that? Courts would say, okay, 6 days was minimum was 7 days, what would require? You did not do it, okay, your reopening fails. Or the court says that, okay, 6 days was there, you take the extended time which was there. See, this would be in court's domain. So what would happen will have to be seen at that, or to that particular situation. 148 OA notice. Then is Sahil Shah, right?
Yeah.
Notice issued on 23rd March 22 for suspension. Reply. So we are in dealing with second compartment. SSC replied on 7th April. Yeah. So it can be because it is the time period. If he's having it, he will. So if it is not from the point of, if it is fitting within the extended time period, he will go on to issue the notices.
Kunal Modi.
Can you please tell me the time actually again?
12:45. Kunal Modi. Can we file return under section 148?
12:45. Can we file return under 148A? 148A does not talk about filing of any return. Can the order be passed in 8 days if we have not? Can the order pass in 8 days if we have? So yeah, so what does it say? Where no reply is furnished within 1 month from the end of the month in which the time or extended time allowed to him to file expires. So this would be there. How far is it worth to contest 148A? See how normal filing would have insulted to refund, but there is a risk of addition in assessment. See, if that is very, how far is it? See 148, when you see the provisions of section 147, what it says that if it income chargeable to tax in the case of an assessee has escaped assessment or reassessment, the assessor shall may subject to the provision of section 148 to 153 assess or reassess such income or recompute the loss or depreciation allowance. Now, see, there were old decisions where in section 148, okay, at 148, it was held that cannot be for the benefit of the assessee. If suppose you are to, if it can be only for the benefit of the department. Now, whereas in the 153A assessments which were there, which was there as per the search, or 153C, you could take up certain points which were not there originally. Now, what would happen to 148 and 148A matters? This would be this would have to be seen as to what would be the line of action which takes ahead as regards these facts. So whether we should do it, not do it, or whether or 148A is as per the whether it would risk of an assessment in the edition, depending whether what was it. So you cannot. It will be again too generic to say whether you would risk the addition to this or not. So one, I'll have to see as to how the provisions happen, or as to how the things happen. One of my client filed return under presumptive taxation, first notice scheme, and another proceeding purchase of this. So these points you will have to probably take up as to how this happened. Probably 1.50, probably 15 lakhs, another notice stating that it was around 1.5 crores, and then the order stating purchase of 1.5 crores, and so on and so forth. So this will have to be what had ultimately happened will have to be seen. Should the return be uploaded even after filing the writ petition? No, so after you have filed the writ petition, you have to inform the assessing officer that it has been done, and the proceedings you have to mention it in the court and tell the assessing officer so such and such has happened, and therefore the proceeding would get stayed, and then the extended time period, depending upon whether the writ is in your favor or against you, would apply. So it would get stalled to that effect. So you would not have to file your return of income. What is the recourse available if you have applied for adjournment? You have acknowledgements for such a claim, but then disappears after the original due date of. I clearly have to contact the helpline and take the effect of these aspects as to what has happened if the windows have closed. Though there are cases where such things are happening that the windows are getting closed. For every notice, assessee has received. So 7-day criteria. So this I think is similar in nature. A 7-day criteria, 30-day criteria, and aspects are mentioned. Assessee has received the notice under 148A for assessment 1819 for a difference in property consideration, but there is no transaction in that here, but there is a transaction of property transfer within family. So again, this is again two general aspects will have to be seen as to what the face of facts of the case are relating to those aspects. When do we raise the objection if the limit is crossed by applying? So these are again, if I may say that these are similar in nature, which we have already discussed as to what would be the fate. So again, you will have to see as to when the notice has been issued, whether it is fitting into compartment 1, 2, or 3, what it says as regards the proviso, whether it would be out, what it says as regards the explanation, and then decide on these questions. So this would be more relating to all these aspects only, if I may say so. So these are so to say, these are all in those nature only. Approval and all, yes, you will have to, the approval, whatever has been mentioned, has to be as per that authority only. Sanction has to be as per that authority. Old provision that one due to pandemic, various due dates for this all we have seen this. So does not mean that you would get these things. Only one question, if I may, that it was mentioned about whether the new scheme has been notified. That I'll have to check and revert. I'll not be able to.
Yes.
Because that is, I've not seen that, so I'll not.
Okay.
So I think, yeah.
So we have done.
I'll share the presentation with you so that you can share. I'll just mail it on the WRC.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, first of all, I'll thank Neelkanth sir for sharing the. Sir, I think all question answer you are saying that are the same.
Yeah,
nature.
so this is basically getting into each and every fact of this, whether the notice, how has been issued. So as I said, it is all similar in nature. Otherwise, so you will take
Yes.
at least half an hour to read
Correct.
each and every question and address everything.
Correct.
Yeah,
Not an issue, sir. You just share your PPT. Will share it
I'll
to
do that.
participant. So I
I'll
would
do
like to thank Neelkanth Khandelwal sir that he has came and explained the topic in depth and very well. This is the hot burning topic right now, sir.
Yes.
And again, I thank WRC Chairman Murtuza Kachwala sir and team WRC for conducting such a good seminar. Even after the bank audit period, so many participants have registered and attended this seminar. Now I would like to thank all the participants to join this seminar, Mishra ji, Subhash and all supporting staff of WRC. And the thanks to CA Arpit Kabra and WRC for giving me opportunity to coordinator of this session. Thanks a lot. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Even my special thanks to Vaibhav and team at WRC for coordinating with me. My apologies for not having mentioned them at the beginning. Without their support, these things cannot happen. My special thanks to them as well.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Vaibhav and team. Thank you.